Welcome to the Conscious Living Podcast, conversations to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. An uplifting and inspiring series of conversations and talks with your host, Jackie Woodside. We are educating minds, empowering lives, and enlightening souls to create a world where love prevails. In this engaging podcast, we deliver exciting, positive, transformative talks and teachings designed to elevate your life. Now, let's join our host, Jackie Woodside, for this week's session.
Hello there. Thank you so much for being with us today on the Conscious Living Podcast, where we are here to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. My name's Jackie Woodside. I am the founder and the host of the Conscious Living Podcast. And I just want to presence today, thinking about who we are and what does it mean to live life more consciously. The fact that you're a person that would choose to spend your time joining in on this podcast tells me a few things about you, that you care about your experience of life. You recognize that you're perhaps the one cultivating your experience of life. And you care about creating a better world for all of us to live in. And I believe that perhaps the path to creating a better world for all of us is for all of us to awaken, be more conscious and more present. And with that topic of being more conscious and present, I just beyond excited to bring to the Conscious Living Podcast today someone who is, and I don't use this word lightly, but someone who's actually like a master at the ability of being present and what that means, and more importantly, what that looks like at the relationship interface, whether that relationship is marriage or parent and child or customer and worker or whatever, colleagues, across the aisle in the workplace. Your ability to be present with people and to understand what that means and to be able to communicate from that place of presence is just such a gift. So I want to introduce you today to Marcia Martin. I'm going to tell you a few things about her. She's an extraordinary leader who I think one of the things I find most stunning is she's one of the founders of what is now called Landmark Education Corporation. She worked back in the day when it was called Earhart Sensitivity Training, I think, EST. So Marcia is one of the founders of the personal development leadership field, absolutely. But she's also a global speaker, executive trainer. She has lived with the indigenous tribes in the rainforest. She has walked the red carpet with George Clooney. She was knighted by the Knights of the Hospitaller of St. John in Jerusalem. She has co-created a Transformational Leader Council with Jack Canfield. And she's done tons of corporate training with all of the large corporations. She's also been on Fox, CBS, CNN, MSNBC. I could go on and on and on. Marcia, you are, outstanding in your field. You are an icon in the personal development and leadership spaces. And I'm just thrilled to have you on the show today. Why don't you take a few minutes, Marcia, just to say a little bit more about yourself and get related to folks on my podcast?
Oh, thank you, Jackie. That was great. I loved hearing about myself. I want to meet myself,
You want to
actually.
meet yourself? Yeah. Who is that
After all
girl?
of
She sounds
that.
amazing. Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, my work in the world has been the same since I was in my late teens. I have been working in the world of consciousness and having people find out who they are and being in touch with their personal power, discovering their abilities, and being able to contribute to make this a better world my entire life. I was one of the original founding members that Werner Erhard created called EST, Erhard Seminars Training.
Seminars training.
And yes, and I was there. I was the senior vice president and board member for the first 10 years. And we took that company from 20 people in the very first seminar. We started with 20 graduates. I was in that seminar, only 20 of us, to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people worldwide.
I would say upwards of millions, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think so. By
Probably
now.
in the millions because it's a worldwide educational corporation.
And I was the senior vice president for the first 10 years. So it was quite an extraordinary experience. And I got much of my training there. And when I left there, I went out into the world on my own to take this work of being more present, as you're saying, and more conscious and more understanding of who we are and the power that we have as human beings, and how to create a reality and a future that we all want, and how to support each other and how to communicate more effectively out into the world. I created my own company, and I have an executive training firm now. And as you said, I've worked with some of the great corporate people, Hard Rock Hotels International and Warner Brothers and Chase and Intercontinental and Capital One. So now what I do is I mostly lead retreats and seminars and coaching programs for the 1,000 Fortune companies, as well as entrepreneurs all over the world. And I really enjoy my work.
It's so beautiful. You said something just now that got my attention. You said you teach people about the power that we have as human beings.
Mm.
And I think that's such a rich statement. And that's a complex notion, right?
It is.
You know,
Well, let me just tell you a little story, because I know we're all connected, and it kind of will add to the answer to what you're talking about and how I describe what I do. One of my animals died in surgery, and we cremated him, and we had his ashes in a box. Gallagher, my 15-year-old Labrador.
oh,
And at the same time, I had Summer, my other Labrador, who was a little older than Gallagher, and 3 cats. And I remember we were doing a memorial for Gallagher, and we put the little box of ashes on the coffee table. And I said to my partner, Tyson, at the time, I said, Tyson, let's start. And we had planned that we would sing some songs, we would say some prayers, we would light some candles, we would play some music, and we would do a memorial. So as I said, let's start, the most remarkable thing happened. In from the other room, in single file, came all 4 animals, one right behind the other. Summer, the Labrador, just immediately laid down by the side of the coffee table. The 2 black cats jumped up, and both of them just settled on each side of the box of ashes of Gallagher. And the white cat jumped up into my lap and settled. Just bang, 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 just like that.
wow.
And it was just like so mystical that I remember Tyson and I said, woo, woo, woo. Well, we continued to do the memorial, and it was about 40 minutes long, and we sang our songs and lit our candles and did all of that. And at the very end, I said, why don't we end by saying the Lord's Prayer? And so Tyson and I joined hands, and we said the Lord's Prayer, and then we said at the end, Amen. And I swear to God, at that exact moment, the moment I said amen, all 4 animals at the very same time stood up and left the room.
Wow.
And I had been to the Ecuadorian rainforest by that time and lived with the indigenous tribes, and I know that we were all connected. But at that moment, when that happened in my home, I knew we're all connected. And I see it this way. I see a human being has a direct alignment and connection to all power and all source, whatever you call the thing that you say created it all. I like to say universe.
Mhm.
I have a metaphor. It's kind of like an ocean. You know, when the ocean just crashes into the rocks on the beach, and how the spray of the ocean goes up in individual kind of droplets of water separate from the ocean for a second as they're spraying, but still very much a part of the whole ocean.
Yeah.
And that's how I see human beings. We're an individual expression of an almighty oneness. And I'm an individual expression, just like one of those droplets of water out of the ocean, and you're an individual expression. And I see us all that way. And we have the same power that an ocean has as it moves as one, if we understand where we come from, and we come from that alignment. So what I do is I teach people how to go inside and connect with their inner power and their personal power, be able to access it, and then use it in the world to create not only the things that they want and dream of in their lives, but the things that will make this a better world. So that's what I mean of the power of human beings, is we're a bigger thing than just our own individual expression.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful, beautiful story. Amazing story about your animals. That's
Yeah,
wow. What
amazing.
it gives me chills. So you say you teach people how to access the power that we have. Can you say more about, what do you teach people? How do we access that power? What is that power that we have? The power to create magic and miracles and the power to create misery.
Well, let's hope we don't create misery, because I kind of consider we have an internal emotional guidance system, which is our emotions. And I think the simplest way to say it is, if you're feeling good, keep thinking and doing what you're thinking and doing. If you're feeling bad, have it be a signal from your emotional guidance system that you're thinking some thought that's not good for you. It's taking you down a path that's not good. You're not feeling good, or you're doing something in action that isn't the right path for you. So find a different thought, find a different action. So I really think that we can create misery, but our power to cause a reality, to design a future, is really in our own hands and our own intentionality if we know who we are. If we think we are the circumstances, or even that we're the effect of circumstances, then what happens is we commit based on the circumstance.
Mhm.
Realize who we are, then we take a stand for something, and we cause the circumstances to come into existence that we need for that particular stand or commitment. So I teach people in the very beginning how to still their mind. I think it was Deepak Chopra, I'm not sure, but some great guru said that the mind was like a great ocean. And when the ocean was tumultuous, and I've been on a sailboat between the islands of Hawaii and 30-foot seas, so I know how crazy and scary it can be.
Yeah.
And he said you could throw the Empire State Building into that kind of a churned up ocean and you wouldn't see the effects of it.
Mm.
It would be lost in all of the other motion. But if you've ever been in Hawaii on a moonlit night when it's all still and the ocean is like glass, in that kind of an ocean, you can throw a pea into it and see the ripples quite clearly. And that's how thoughts are in our mind. If we have a still mind, we can put a thought in and have that thought grow into a thing or a result. But if our mind is all crazy with so many other thoughts, like that tumultuous ocean, it doesn't matter how hard we think or how focused we are, it's not going to have any effect. And people aren't used to being still. I like to say we're a bunch of human doings instead of human beings, right? And so that's part of what the first training is how does one be still and how do you train your mind? Once you've accomplished that, and sometimes it takes a while because our minds, I like to say, are like a juvenile delinquent. Nobody's trained them and they're out there doing whatever they want. And they kind of, the mind has kind of hypnotized us into thinking it's in control instead of us having a mind. The mind is having us.
Who's thinking who?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So once that we can have people be still, then I can teach them how to hold a thought, how to get in touch with their feelings, how to create a visualization, how to meditate, how to reflect, how to be in the imagination world the way that you need to be in order to have it create or come across the bridge into the reality world.
Beautiful. All of what you're saying predicates on people holding a sophisticated understanding that their experience is generated internally, not externally. And I feel like we're living in a time that like you almost have to start there. Most people feel like, well, of course I have this feeling or this thought because this external circumstance. Of course I'm upset because my spouse just left me. Of course I'm elated because my son just finished school. Of course I'm X because Y, and the Y is the external condition. So I think that's the prevalent consciousness, if you will, prevalent perspective that we're living in, is that my experience of life is generated outside of me, and I'm just having this reaction, this experience. In fact, I in my teaching, I have a distinction between circumstance and experience.
Mm-hmm.
That the circumstance is the external condition, and your experience is what you generate internally in response to your external condition.
Yes.
And So just, pick up there, Marcia. I mean, I'm sure you deal with this, even though you're dealing with high-level executives of large corporations. They're still human beings living in this time, right? So do
Well,
you see that? And
yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate what you're saying, because I think, first of all, we all know you're a very trained human being. And I'm a very trained human being. I've been doing this work since I was in my late teens, early 20s. And now I'm 77. So this is a long time to be doing this work. And I feel like I'm the most trained person that you could ever find on the whole planet. But
right,
you are
right.
right up there with the training as well. And not everybody's had the opportunity for that. In fact, in my seminars, I do personal development seminars for individuals, not just corporations. And many parents come to me, and after they've done my seminar, they say, "Oh my God, will you train my children? Can my children come?" And I started with 19-year-olds and then got to 12-year-olds, then got to 9-year-olds. I used to interview them to see if they would, like, I don't want them to be bored in the training.
Right.
But the point is we learned young. We learned early, and not everybody had that opportunity or has it. And even if you're a very senior executive in a corporation, in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine that knows one of the astronauts that just went up to the moon, not to the moon, to the space station. And he's a very good friend of hers, and he's been talking to them, and he's in the same pretty much business as we are in terms of training people. And she was saying how they've been so trained, except for how do they deal with each other?
Oh, wow.
How do they communicate? How do they handle if they're irritated? How do they handle if they're upset? How do they handle if they don't agree with another point of view? Nobody's given them that kind of training. And I was just laughing because it seems like it's so evident to you and I, since we've been in the midst of it, our lives, and it's our work, but it isn't the way most people are. So when I go in, I was sharing with you how I do a 3-day program retreat for executives, which is really the foundational concepts, principles, laws of communication, of relationship, of leadership, of how things are manifested, of results. And I've designed this 3-day to cover those particular conceptual principles. And one of them is the thing that you're talking about, because people think that something external makes them feel something, makes them angry, makes them upset. And so I teach them how the mind works. And how the mind works is that, it collects a certain amount of data for a certain amount of time till it thinks it has enough data to give you all the answers the rest of your life. And it stops collecting around the time you're 12 at the very latest or the earliest. And it's over. That mind thinks it doesn't need any more information. And it captures all of these incidents that we go through where we have trauma, where things aren't working, where we're threatened. And it holds everything in those incidents like a book in a library holds information, so that if anything happens again that looks like that, the mind considers it is that, then the mind will throw us into a default, put us on automatic, and have us act out the old thing. So exactly what you're saying, and I know you know this, the event happens outside of ourselves. It doesn't make us anything. What it does is triggers an old incident that if we're not conscious and we don't notice and are aware we're triggered, that we operate automatically. And I teach people how to notice that they're on automatic or triggered, how to settle themselves down, get back to being present so they can make a choice. And everybody always has at least one choice, which is, how am I going to respond to this event? And from there, then we can get to the place where people realize, oh my gosh, I have an inner world, and it's a bigger thing than the external circumstances. So it's a long process, Jackie, but eventually we get there.
It is. I teach one program that's 6 months long, which is long by today's standards, a weekly course. And I always say to them, this is not a course, it's a way of life.
Yes, absolutely.
Living life consciously, engaging in life consciously, being the conscious creator or
Yes.
co-creator of your life it's a way of life. And gosh, you've said so many things that I want to pick up on. Um, One of the things is you've said, I teach them how to quiet their mind. I teach them how to notice that they've been triggered. Can you say a little bit more about either one of those? I guess quieting your mind first, because if your mind's not quiet, you're not going to have the ability to notice that you've been triggered. You're just triggered. Your
Yes.
mind,
Yes.
your thoughts are thinking you. I use that phrase a lot in my teaching. Your thoughts are thinking you.
Yes.
Until you have the ability to be aware of the thought, to reflect on the thought, and then choose how to respond or redirect the thought into
Yes.
some other experience. So pick up there, Marcia, and share more about your thoughts there.
Well, the way I work is I listen to what people say, language itself, because language is one of those things that's part of content. It's not contextual. Assumptions are the context in which language lives as content. So, for example, if you were alive during Christopher Columbus's days when he was about ready to sail off to discover the New World, and you were his mother or his sister or his love or somebody that loved him very much, it wouldn't be possible in that way of assuming the world is, in that context of how people believed. They believed the world was flat, that there was a big drop off at the edge. At the end of the drop off, there was a big, terrible monster, and you would be eaten alive. In that context, it would be impossible for somebody to go down to the dock with a bottle of champagne and say, Bon voyage, Christopher, have a great trip. Do you see? So language lives inside of how people assume the way it is. And so if I listen, and if anybody listens to what people say, you can also hear what they're not saying, which has to be so for them to say what they said. And once I understand what their assumption is, the paradigm they're living in, then I can say, well, how about looking at it like this? This is another way you could consider, and I will share a different assumption that will allow them to see a different thing. That kind of a conversation in coaching allows them to be aware of things they weren't aware of before. And awareness is the key, as you know. And so when people say to me, well, how do I do this? How do I still my mind? How do I do that? How do I change my mindset? How do I say there's only one answer to the how to question, which is awareness.
Yeah.
The more aware you are, the more choices you have. And the awareness itself will lead you in the right direction. So if I can increase your awareness of what you're thinking of, what you're looking at, and so in my questions to them or in my teaching to them, I kind of like, if you're in my seminar, I'm sure this happens in your seminar too. I can see people's heads are going, what did she say? How did she say that? Because it's a different, they don't get it at first. But once they hear it and they're aware of a new way of seeing or listening or that things exist, then they start to be aware of when they're thinking in the old way and what they could be thinking in the new way.
Yeah.
And then that awareness begins to open up, and then we start making different choices, and then the conversation continues.
So you're using the word assumptions, but I know you also teach a lot around perspectives. So talk about the power of perspective and people's ability to observe their perspectives, alter their perspectives. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I love perspective, and you can say we can put it all into mindset. Einstein said that the quality of your thinking produces the results that you have. If you want a different result, get a different way of thinking. Most people try to change the result. I look at changing the mindset, and the mindset is made up of the perspective, where you're looking from, the assumptions that you've taken on, or the belief systems that you've considered or been taught. And so it's all kind of in one big box.
Yeah.
But I do like this particular metaphor. You know that picture that you can look at, and one way you look at it is old woman,
Yes.
a hag, and then the other way you can look at it, it's a beautiful young woman.
Yes.
There are several kinds of pictures like that.
Right.
Well, here's the deal. The old woman and the young woman exist at the same time. So they're both there.
Yep.
However, you can only see one or the other in one instant, depending on where you're looking from. So it's not whether something is there, Everything is there. That's the point, is we create our reality. In other words, it's all possible to be real for us, but what is it we're creating? What shows up? What occurs for us? Well, whatever occurs for us is dependent on our perspective, which in part also includes our beliefs and our assumptions and the way that we think.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I work with people on is, okay, that's an interesting way of considering something is so. Is it working? Do you have what you want? Because if you don't have what you want, I say get a different perspective.
Yeah.
Because if you have a different perspective, a different place to look from, or a different assumption or a different belief, if you get rid of some of the limiting beliefs that you have and consider different beliefs that could be possible and look from that particular place, different things will occur for you or show up.
Yeah.
It's exactly like when you look out and do you see what works or do you see what doesn't work first? Is your focus on what you don't like, or is your focus on what you do like?
Yes.
Is your focus on what you want, or is your focus on what you don't want? It depends on where your perspective is as to what will show up for you.
And
so perspective is everything.
It is everything. And it's so important for people to realize that their thoughts aren't the truth. They're just their thoughts. That's one of the things that I like to drop into my classes a lot. Be careful not to believe everything you think, because your thoughts aren't facts. Your feelings are not facts.
No.
You know, that's a great question. Is that a feeling or a fact? He was so pissed off at me. Is that a feeling or a fact? You feel like he was pissed, or do you have the fact that he was pissed?
Well, and also you have to look at the different worlds we live in. We live in the world of doing or action. And then we also have the world of having, like we have an interpretation of the action. And where our interpretations or assessments come from is watching somebody move in the world of action. So somebody speaks, somebody listens, somebody moves. Then we add meaning to that.
Yes, right.
Interpret it.
Something.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So there's a separations. We have what happened, and then we have our interpretation of what happened meant.
Yep.
What's the meaning? Well, we add our own meaning. We jump to the conclusion, I think it means that.
Yeah.
And we consider that's what happened. No, that's the interpretation we added to the whatever the action was.
Yeah.
So
One of my favorite consulting stories was I was able to solve a toxic work environment, or help them solve a toxic work environment by helping them deconstruct the meaning that they had made to the fact that two of the supervisors were not morning people and walked through the office area not saying good morning.
Yes, right.
And what people made that mean.
Yeah.
That oh, she doesn't like me. She's not supportive. She's just so not in tune with the way that the rest of us are. You know, this whole world got created. And then of course people share their interpretations with other people to validate their experience, right?
Yes.
That's what we call our friends, those that will validate our interpretations. And so it had created this whole thing. And I got called in to do a consulting around the toxic work environment. And it took a while to kind of get it all boiled down. And at some point, like the light bulb just went off for me. I was like, this is all about the fact that these two don't say good morning.
That's right. That's right.
And a whole world got created around it.
I do this exercise in my retreats where I say, okay, let's all pretend that you work for me, you're on my staff, and we're having a cocktail party at the end of the day. And I walk in, and then I walk in front of them. And I said, and I turn, and I look in the direction of, and I find somebody, and I say, like John. And when I look at him, I hit my head, I let out I shake my head, I roll my eyes, I stamp my feet, I turn, and I leave really, really fast out the door. So then I say, okay, now let's pretend you called somebody that you know that knows me. What would you say happened? And they all say the same thing. They'll say something like, Marcia was mad and John's in trouble and he's going to get fired and he's done something wrong. And I just let them go for a while.
Yeah.
then I get them to see that the only action was I walked in, I turned, I looked in this direction, I hit my head, I stomped my feet, I let out a sound, I shook my head, I turned, I left. And that maybe their interpretation could have been accurate. It could have been, I looked at John, I realized that I hadn't put his warning in the HR record and I wanted him fired. And so I was running back to do it. It also could be, I looked in the direction of John and I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm in charge of bringing the Rolex watch that we're giving him as a present for his outstanding work. And I left it on my desk and I've got to go get it really fast before it's time to give it to him. That could have been so. Or it could have been, I walked in, realized I have diarrhea. I didn't even see anybody. I just know I've got diarrhea. I've got to get out of here really fast. And I run out the door. So it's really important when we talk about the laws of communication for people to be able to separate their interpretation of what's happening from the actual happening itself. The only thing that ever happens in life is movement, speaking, and listening. But enthusiasm doesn't happen. That's an interpretation of a way that somebody is speaking or listening or moving. And laziness doesn't happen. That's an interpretation that we've added in meaning to some kind of speaking, listening, or moving that somebody has done that we've now assessed and added the meaning to and interpreted a certain way. So I'm with you on that one. I bet you did create a very good result by having the people see that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. Speaking, listening, and moving. I guess I wonder a bit about where the spiritual energetic domain shows up in that framework.
Well, for me, it's not action. Light is an action. Light is a bigger thing. Light is, and that's for me, the
contextual field, if you will.
Yeah,
a contextual field.
Yeah, I think it's who we are and it's constant and it permeates everything.
Yeah.
It's not an action itself, it's an existence.
You're more really talking on the human domain, speaking, listening, and acting on the human domain inside of a larger context of what you're saying, light or spirit. Continue your thought.
Well, I just think that there's an imagination world. That's the world of being. There's the world of action. That's what we do, which is speaking, listening, and moving. And then there's the world of having. Those are the three domains we live in, the three worlds that we have: be, do, have. Spiritual exists in the world of being. And it exists in a different way. Like you can imagine you're on a plane to Hawaii, but if you want to actually be on a plane to Hawaii, you have to take your body and move it towards.
You have to move there, yeah, move yourself. Pick up that physical. That still annoys me a little bit that we actually have to pick up this.
I bet it would annoy you. That's funny.
Yeah, I know. It's like I just want to have the thought and just be there. But we're so steeped in the human condition. I know that someday it will be possible. Maybe it will be in the afterlife or whatever, my next incarnation. But I just know that there's this denseness of being in the physicality of our human experience that someday we will transcend. That's my belief, and I'm sticking to it.
Excellent.
Marcia, there's so much more I want to talk with you about that I could ask you. I've definitely got to have you back to go.
Oh, I would love that.
Deeper into a lot of what we've touched on today. We've delved into that we are the creators of our experience, that we might not dictate every circumstance in life, that there's things happening around us all the time. But our power as human beings, as I hear you saying it, lies in our ability to be aware of the interpretations that we're having, the meaning that we're making. And then as we grow in our ability and as we grow in our awareness, to actually choose, is that reaction the reaction I want to have? Is that reaction going to create an outcome that's pleasant or helpful? And then actually choose thoughts, interpretations, reactions, and behavior. And that's really where the magic is, right? When your ability to observe and then choose, and then, wow, Dad
Wow.
didn't blow up at the fact that the living room was a mess, or mom wasn't all frantic at the fact that we have 10 things that we have to get done this Saturday and there's only room for 5 of them. Like
Yeah.
people can actually be different.
I always tell people you don't have all the choices necessarily that you want. My brother was in jail, in prison, and it took him a long time to get to a place where he was choosing to act in a way that was really helpful for him. And he was only in prison for 3 years. Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years.
Wow.
Now, neither of them had the choice to be out of prison before the time that they were released.
Yeah.
But each of them had the choice of how they were going to respond to the experience of being there.
Exactly right.
And it took my brother a bit of a time to where he realized this could be an opportunity for him to grow. Whereas Nelson Mandela chose a behavior in such a way that he changed the world.
Oh,
So we don't always have the choices, all the choices that we want, but we can
sure.
always say we at least have at least one choice always,
Yeah.
which is how am I going to respond
How am
to
I
the
going to-
situation I find myself in?
That story about your brother and blessings on that whole experience for your whole family, but
you.
sounds like he had got exactly what he needed in that process. But it reminds me of the writings of a couple of people that I want to mention and their experience. One, I'm sure you're very familiar with, Viktor Frankl's work, Man's Search for
Love it.
Meaning.
Yes. And
Which,
my brother said that was one of the best things he read while he was in prison.
while he
So
was in prison.
yeah.
Yeah, it's, for those of you who perhaps don't know the book, he wrote that I'm sorry, based on his experience of being interred in the camps during the Holocaust. And he developed a psychotherapeutic approach called logotherapy based on the meaning that you have for life. And it's a profound book and profound piece of work that he created while he was in the Holocaust, in the internment camps at Auschwitz. The other one is much less known, Marcia, and I highly encourage you to find it and read it. It's the diary, I'm sorry, An Interrupted Life, the diary of Eddie Hillesum. An
Okay.
Interrupted Life, the diary of Eddie Hillesum. And like Viktor Frankl, Eddie Hillesum was also a Jewish woman who was in the internment camps in the concentration camps. But because of her skills, she sometimes would be let go to go work for the Nazi regime, processing paperwork of Jews being sent to the camps. And then she herself would go to the camps. And then sometimes she would be released and then she would be back into the camps. And her diaries, she's hailed as a modern day mystic.
Mm.
And in her writings, she wrote about like when she was out of the concentration camps, how she longed to be back in there to bring that sense of peace and hope and love and possibility to the people that were suffering. And while she was in the camp, she wrote about, even though there's barbed wire all around, all I see is the beauty of the flowers and the bird that's sitting on the wire. And one of my favorite lines, she said that I cannot hate these people. I can't hate the Nazis. I can't hate my captors because any ounce of hatred that I bring into the world makes the whole world more inhospitable, a more inhospitable place for us all. Profound readings.
Yes. Very.
And so I often use those examples, and your brother's example is perfect as well for us to really recognize there's what's happening around you, there's the circumstance, and then there's who you decide to be in the face of it. And therein, as to end where we began, therein lies our power as human beings.
Love it. Love you too.
I love you too. So glad to have this time together, and I definitely want to do a round two. So thank you so much, Marcia. Where's the best place after people listening to you, wanting to get to know you a little bit? Where can people track you down and stalk you a bit on the internet?
Oh, awesome. My website, marciamartin.com, marciamartin.com. And I'm doing a new TV series now with Bold Brave TV. So if you go to YouTube and look up Bold Brave TV, Marcia Martin, I have a series called Talk This Way for Success. You can watch some of my
I love it.
segment there, episodes there.
Bold Brave TV, is that what you said? Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like it was made just for you.
Oh, thank you.
Marcia, thank you so much for being my guest, for being my friend, and being an just eternal inspiration for me to live a more conscious life. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. God bless you.